Welcome into another edition of SEC Football and Beyond. I'm Neil McCready. Chris Landry here with me as well. As we were just talking about just for a few minutes there before we hit the record button, there is a lot to talk about today, and not all of it is particularly pleasant. But we, as Chris was saying just a minute ago before we got started, we knew going into this season that these stories would pop up here to there, and here and there, I should say, and indeed they have. So, Chris, first of all, hello. Hope you're doing well.
I am doing well, and it is going to be an interesting week, as it was an interesting weekend this past weekend, and we learned a lot. Now we're trying to figure out how we're going to get this season in, because we're getting into some difficult situations. It's looking like it's heading towards the worst single week SEC-wise, COVID-wise, for the SEC.
So let's jump a little bit. Let's jump into it. Auburn and Mississippi State, that game has already been postponed. Both of those teams had been able to get through the first, 6 weeks of the season unscathed. So they moved that game to December the 12th. So on its face, no big deal. Moved the game December 12th. We knew games would get moved. That one got moved. Where we run into some problems here, Alabama is scheduled to play at LSU at 5 o'clock on Saturday. LSU has already had one game due to Florida's issues delayed. LSU and Florida were postponed. They're scheduled to play on December the 12th. So obviously LSU does not have an open date on December the 12th. And it appears that Alabama is destined for the SEC championship game on December the 19th. So that date is not in play as of this moment. LSU, I am told, is very likely going to have to postpone this one / cancel this one / I don't know what you do with this one, but I'm told the likelihood of a game on Saturday is very low. You're there in Baton Rouge. You probably are a little more connected to it than I am. What are you hearing?
Well, I know this. I know that the league, not that they don't want to play every game, but they're going to do their darndest to try to get this game off, because with all due respect to Auburn, Mississippi State, or some other games on the schedule, it's important, but this is really important. They're getting a lot of pressure from CBS, one of their television partners. Yep. So here's the thing. I mean, they're stuck with, well, let me rephrase it. They've got the Masters, and then they're stuck with this lead-in game, which is not going to be very good to begin with. It's not going to be the Alabama LSU game of the past, but it's still programming, and so the partners are trying to figure it out. But there's really not a whole lot that they can do.
Let's dive into that, because you nailed it. Here's the thing: CBS has had a plan for a while. We all know about best laid plans, but CBS has had a plan for a while. They were going to have the Masters this weekend. They are having the Masters this weekend. Saturday is the third round. 5 o'clock Central, of course, means it's 6 o'clock Eastern, which means it's probably too dark at that point to play golf at Augusta National. So they were going to play golf all day on CBS, leading into this what has been a big rivalry game over the last, decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
This game has been huge. It's the betting line on it's 24 points right now, but regardless, this is a game that most of the country has watched over the last few years, and CBS was going to have a ratings bonanza on Saturday. They were going to have people watching the Masters for the novelty of the Masters in November, leading into Alabama at LSU, Tiger Stadium at nighttime, all that stuff, right? And so CBS, yeah, you're right, and they're saying, hey, look, don't cancel this thing if there's a chance you can play it. Don't cancel this thing if there's a chance that LSU's got enough to play it. We're not really worried about the competitive part of this. We need the game. We're the ones that are paying you guys the bills right now. We need a little help.
Yeah, and I think as we're doing this show live Tuesday morning, I mean, you got to really know by Tuesday. They've got to make a decision within the league office today, yay or nay on this. But just for people that are aware, they're down to one quarterback. The tight end room is, either infected or quarantined. You've got some issues potentially in the secondary and the offensive line. I mean, how bad those things are, just we're going to have to see how this is. I would say right now that the meter is less than 50-50 that they would be able to play it. But again, I'm going to stress that for the reasons that Neil just mentioned. There's going to be more of a concerted effort. Again, I'm not saying that they don't try to play every game, but again, they're not going to sweat Auburn, Mississippi State like they're going to try to sweat this. Right. This is a big deal. And Alabama, even in a blowout game against LSU, Alabama fans will be watching every minute of it, and they're going to be really upset there if they can't play any Alabama game. And that's sure. Huge. It's huge for them. And it will not affect Alabama's playoff status. But again, the SEC would really like it if Alabama and Florida, which are likely going to end up in the SEC championship game, would both get their shot at LSU. But again, we're running out of spots. There's even been somebody suggested to me, and this is not going to happen, folks. Don't go say Landry said. No, there's even been talk about could we switch it? And it was a half joke. Okay, I mean, it was a joke, but hey, could we switch? Because Mississippi State's the reason why Auburn can't play. Hey, can we and LSU's the reason why Alabama can't play. Hey, can we switch the Iron Bowl this week in prime time after the Masters so that we, and it's not in a 2020. I wouldn't think it's the greatest thing, but it's not going to happen. But it's one of those things that you at least have to think about for 5 seconds. Who's healthy? Who can we put together? It's just not really doable, but I thought it was funny and I wanted to bring it up. So
yeah, and
I did it.
The other problem for CBS is that there's no natural other game that you could move. I mean, for example, Georgia and Missouri isn't going to get a national audience at 5:00 Central. Texas A&M and Tennessee, which is another game we have to talk about from a COVID standpoint, that's not going to get a national audience. Arkansas, Florida is not going to get a national audience. South Carolina, Ole Miss is not going to get a national audience. There's no game to fill in for Alabama, LSU, where you could just adjust times. I mean, it would be simple to say, hey, South Carolina, Ole Miss, you guys move up an hour and a half. Okay.
Yeah, but CBS,
I'm not CBS doesn't want that game after the Masters. That's not a build-up to that game.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm not an expert on contract law with television contracts. I've done a lot of player contracts in the NFL, but there's some financial issues for the league with this. I mean, you don't have this game, you don't have the revenue that affects it. So, look, there is no question that the desire to play this is off the charts for the reasons that we mentioned. We just don't know. We're going to have to let it play out. Neil just mentioned it. So A&M had to shut down practices Monday. Now, what does that really mean? It's not overreact. I don't know. I'm not saying the A&M Tennessee game is going to be canceled, but we need to find out, is there any there? I mean, is there any issues there that could maybe prevent that game from being played? So we're looking at the potential at this point of one game already off, one game looks bleak, in one game that we just need to keep an eye out on within the league. And I would say that if I'm ranking the importance of the games, clearly, Alabama, LSU because it's Alabama, Florida, Arkansas because it's Florida, and Arkansas. That's it. But A&M too is one that would be interesting, and certainly for their pedigree and their ultimate goal, they need to be as impressive and play as many games as possible. But no, there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing anybody can do about it. There's going to be a concerted effort to try to get as many of these games in for obvious reasons, competitively, financially. We're just going to have to let it play out. Now,
what are you hearing about Texas A&M, by the way? Texas A&M paused activities yesterday.
Just that. They paused activities on Monday. So what does that mean for Tuesday? What does the testing show? I think we're going to know today. I think today's the day that you need to kind of get a feel for it. Are there any problems there? If they're positive tests, how many? How does it affect it? Can the game still be on? Is it a full-on major problem, I think we're going to know that tonight. I would not classify that as, I mean, it's a concern, but I wouldn't classify it in the same category as what's going on at LSU right now. It just sounds like it's not as bad as it is what's going on at LSU.
And Sam Pittman, the Arkansas coach, tested positive, but I've not heard anything else about other problems inside the Razorbacks program. Have you?
I have not, and just hope Sam's okay, and have to deal with that. But yeah, no, it's just amazing, isn't it? It's the people keep saying, well, it's going to go away. It's going to go away. It's not going away. This is getting worse, and apparently it's the weather that everybody forecasted that's maybe contributing to this. But it's going to be an issue, and it's starting to affect the SEC. So we'll see how this plays out the rest of the way. And I think it's going to be the quote unquote eyeball test is going to mean more than ever before when you're looking at these teams, because we're not going to be looking at teams playing the same amount of games, same amount of schedules. It's just not going to be that way. You can't look at quote unquote resumes. Resumes are going to be out the window this year.
I can't count how many times I said in the summer that this was going to be a different kind of a year.
Mm-hmm.
This was not going to be a year about who won and who lost. It was going to be a year about getting to the finish line and getting your TV money, because these schools are losing catastrophic amounts of money. It's a part of the story that, frankly, guys like me are failing to report, because it's hard to get exact numbers and you don't want to be wrong. And people are being very careful about inside athletics programs, about numbers and that kind of thing. But money is being lost in ways that are difficult to comprehend. And all of these schools, Chris, are going into this. Here we are. It's November the 10th. And as crazy as this sounds, people are starting to think, okay, well, what do we do about 2021? What does that year look like? Can we put fans in the stands in 2021? The big story in our country yesterday was vaccines. Are the vaccines going to be in place that allow us to fill up stadiums? Because if you're planning ahead for 2021, and believe me, they are, right now, you can't count on that. And so there's the TV networks are looking at this and going, hey, this was a novelty one year. Are we doing this a second year? What is this? What does this look like? What do schedules look like? There's just a lot here. This season, as much as we all, fans, media, all of us, want this to be about who are the best four teams and have a playoff and let's crown a champion, that's not what this season's about. And it hasn't been about that in a long time.
Yeah, we're going to crown one, and I think, people have asked me, is it going to be an asterisk by it? You know what? Look, somebody that can navigate through this and end up being one of the best teams, kudos to them. Let's call it what it is. COVID, non-COVID, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, or three of the best teams in the country. I think now we'll get to it. I'm sure you have to throw Notre Dame into the mix. There's going to be a fourth team, and they're the leading contender right now for the fourth team. Maybe third right now if you were to rank them, but fourth. The only reason why this is going to be an asterisk in my mind is if somebody, outside of that group of the top three wins it, and it's directly a result of one of those or those teams in the top three all have major COVID issues. And we see, and it's the best team that just was the healthiest. Because I think the best team is still going to be – the best teams are still going to be there regardless of how many games they play. I think that's going to be – but, yeah, it is a different way we're going to get to that point, and it's going to be on a different time frame. But, man, a lot of big-time action this weekend. What a weekend. Yeah,
what a weekend it was. Woo. It was really some interesting games. Let's get to some of those, and we'll start with the big one, of course, the one that we all look forward to, the one that we talked about a lot last week. Kyle Trask was absolutely fantastic. Florida was just on fire really throughout the game offensively. All we heard about all year was how great Georgia's defense was, and it had been up until Saturday. 44-28, the Gators win. Huge win for Florida. Kind of vaults them into the title conversation because they certainly are going to get an opportunity against Alabama in all likelihood on December the 19th. What were your takeaways from the Gators standpoint with the win?
Well, they were outstanding. Georgia defensively and breaking down the tape clearly is going to try to take out Pitts and Tony as best that they can. And to some degree it did. But they do have other weapons. And Florida really showed that. The thing that stood out to me the most on tape was, and this is where I thought offensively, Florida had a great game plan of, when you're, for people don't know, I mean, I know most of our fans are really sophisticated, but when you number receivers, you number from the outside in. So number one, number two, what Florida did a tremendous job with motions to confuse Georgia. And I'm assuming had a lot to do with the guys that were not in the secondary. That was normally, Colin in particular is the guy that makes all the checks. Georgia had an awful problem of communicating who's number one, who is number two, because it changed. And that's why all those flat routes that turned into wheel routes were just devastating, because Florida was not in a position to cover that. And it was big-time play after big-time play after big-time play. And we talked about it that, look, if it's a close game at the line of scrimmage, then, it could go either way and advantage Georgia. But the likelihood was that if there's a blowout, it's going to be Florida blowing out Georgia, because once Florida got a lead, Georgia was incapable offensively of doing anything. They had guys open. Georgia still had opportunities to come back in this game, but you can see the ineffectiveness of Georgia's passing game time and time again. The rhythm, the timing, not there. Quarterback accuracy, not there. Bennett had the injured shoulder, not real effective. Went with Mathis, which, Kirby's got some things to answer big time now, and I'm curious this week whether we see JT Daniels or, we learn a little bit more about why the heck aren't we, and if it's just stubbornness or it's the injury factors contributed to it. But they obviously hadn't prepared JT Daniels enough for a game like this, and my sense and my understanding from the coaching staff is that Kirby has kind of believed, and look, we're going to win it our way, defense, running game, and Stetson can protect the football. And that's kind of out the window. Now it's basically he's going to have to go to JT Daniels now.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? Because something happened this morning also as a breaking story, not a big deal, but it's an interesting story. Newman, the quarterback from Wake Forest who transferred to Georgia and then opted out, he's going to the Senior Bowl.
Yes.
Accepted a bid to the Senior Bowl, which is for those that don't know, for seniors, that's a big deal. That bowl game has it's been this way for a long time, dating back to my days in Mobile. An invitation to that is essentially a almost a guarantee that you are either getting drafted or very much on the board to get drafted, and the NFL wants to see you. So here's my question, Chris, and I know you don't necessarily know the answer to this. At some point, when you look at Georgia's quarterback play as a whole, because the assumption when it happened, when Newman left, was that, well, Daniels had come in and won the job, and he didn't, whatever. At some point, does this go on Kirby? Right? I mean,
it's not some point. It does go on Kirby right now.
Yeah, so their quarterback play is abysmal. It's the reason they've lost these two games. It's the reason that they're a good team and not a great team. It's the reason that they're not truly a contender this season, despite the fact that they have a very talented roster. At some point, answers have to come out, right, as to why Newman left. Because I don't think Newman left. I could be wrong, and I don't mean this in a incendiary way, but COVID provides an excuse, if you will. And I'm not minimizing it, but like Kylan Hill did not opt out of Mississippi State because of COVID concerns. I saw somebody report that. That's not why he left.
Right.
Maybe Newman did, but at some point people
I can tell you why Newman left.
Okay.
First of all, the narrative that he was beaten out is not true. There was nobody to beat out anybody. JT Daniels hadn't practiced. So you had no spring practice. JT wasn't cleared to practice. There was no beating out anybody. I mean, it wasn't, Newman didn't stay long enough to be beaten out is what I'm saying. Okay,
Right.
Here's what it happened there. And then you're right. They used COVID as a cover. Jamie Newman, people in his camp, and we'll just kind of keep it as that, people that friends of the family and people have said, look, you stay there. They're going to run the pro-style offense. It's not a fit for what you do. You're better off just preparing with a quarterback coach and get ready and live off of what you did at Wake Forest, which was pretty effective. Pretty effective because right or wrong, and I could take issue with that I think he could have helped himself with really good play at Georgia this year. I think he could have helped his draft status. But he was convinced that don't risk getting injured, which is kind of the general thing. But more importantly, it's not the injury risk. It's not the COVID risk. It is don't risk getting in a situation where the offense, because it's a pro-style offense that doesn't work and develop the passing game enough to hurt your draft stock. That's the reality of what happened inside. I'm aware of that. I do a lot of work with Jim, and I think he's very well deserving of getting a Senior Bowl invite. We got a committee that works on it. I think he's a really talented guy. I think he could have helped himself, but I'm a guy that wants guys to play, and the reality is that's why he left. So let's just kind of get that off the table. And now the kid's not going to come out and say that. I guess maybe it's not the nicest thing in the world that I said it, but I mean, I think at this point it's pretty obvious what's going on. Jamie Newman not going to come out and say I don't like the offense. I don't think yada yada yada. Well, the Jordan narrative and the media there and the fans there, well, he got beaten out. He really got beaten out by JT Daniels, and JT Daniels still can't beat out Stetson Bennett and Juan Mathis. No, I mean, we know what's going on. It's something that I mentioned last week, and maybe this is a good thing, but this is a reality to Kirby that this is not working. And now your program, you've got to take a hard look at it. And so this is the issue why, Brock Vandagriff is a really talented guy. And he's the great young quarterback that's come. If you're going to continue to recruit good quarterbacks, they need to know that they're going to get developed. And that's got to change coming forward. And I think it needs to change now because the reality is their goals for the season, I mean, Florida's going to have to slip up big time for Georgia to get back in it.
Yeah.
It's just right now they just need to win. And if they continue to not get through the rest of this season without developing and improving this passing game, then this season's been a wash for them big time because at least for Kirby in his eyes, had he pulled out that game last week, they still got all their goals. And in Kirby's mind, we could win it our way, the way I like to do it, the way I think is the best way to play. I think he's been slow to change, and I think he's going to have to now. And if he doesn't, then to your point, as I said before, this is an easy fix for Kirby. This doesn't look to me like Mark Richt. Okay, this looks fixable. Right. But just because it's fixable doesn't mean that Kirby's willing or he has the know-how. And if he doesn't, well, then it'll continue to regress. But that's kind of how I read it.
Says a lot about Florida, right?
Sure.
I mean, where they are today, they lose that game very close against Texas A&M, could have easily won it. They could be in a completely different spot today, just change one drive in College Station back in, I guess that was early October, late September. I mean, you change that one drive, and they're in a different spot right now. Are they a team from what you see today, though? They're going to get their opportunity, it appears. Are they a team that could beat Alabama on a neutral field?
No. I think they're good. I think that I think you could put them on the field again with A&M. You could put them on the field with Notre Dame. I think they could absolutely play with them. Look, anything can happen in one game. So all you care about if you're Florida is taking care of business, getting your shot. They can score some points on Alabama. Yeah, they can. But that defense is, Alabama will light them up. And I would trust Alabama getting off the field against Florida's offense a little bit more than I would Florida's defense. Florida's defense is still very limited. Don't get fooled by, hey, they shut out Georgia. Well, again, we just kind of discussed what Georgia is. No, I don't think they match up well against Alabama. I don't think they match up well against Ohio State. I don't think they match up well with Clemson. They are a good team. But as I've said before, I still think that there are 3 teams that are elite. And I want to give a lot of credit to Notre Dame, because even without Trevor Lawrence, that's impressive. I don't think Florida could have beaten Clemson, with DJ, but I think Florida is definitely amongst the groups I'd considered like for the 4th spot, but they're going to have to beat Alabama to do it. And I don't think they're going to be able. If they do it, they're in. The SEC champion will be in. And then, it'll be about, all right, Notre Dame, if you're got 1 loss and that 1 loss is to Clemson, then it's going to be about Alabama and Notre Dame. But I really don't like Florida's chance. Other than anything can happen on any given day type, I don't think they match up very well.
You mentioned Texas A&M. They go to Columbia, South Carolina, and I think they won 1,048 to 3. It was just 48 to 3. I'm sorry. 48 to 3. That game got out of hand quickly. A&M played incredibly well. South Carolina looked, frankly, abysmal. 48 to 3. That's, first of all, kudos to the Aggies. They continue to roll. You nailed that from week 1 when I had questions about them in their game against Vanderbilt. You told me I was wrong. You have been proven to be right week after week after week. You've nailed the Aggies. They are a legitimately good football team. We'll get to them in a minute. Let's talk about South Carolina, though. That's the kind of beatdown that in a non-COVID year may have led to action on Monday. But it's a COVID year, and Will Muschamp's buyout is around $13 million. And without giving sources away, I can tell you that right now South Carolina doesn't have that laying around.
No, they don't. But it's fun to spend somebody else's money anyway, isn't it? So let me do that. Let me real quickly say I would see if there is a way that we could do it and we could raise money. And what I would do simultaneously in a parallel session is go to Hugh Freeze and say, Hugh, yeah, there are opportunities and maybe other opportunities. I think South Carolina is the most unique job in the SEC. What do I mean by that? That's a vague comment.
Yeah.
They look and act like an elite program, meaning they fill the stadium. The atmosphere is unbelievable. They kind of do a lot of the things that big-time programs do that never won. And the expectation why they get frustrated and they don't like getting blown out and not being competitive. The reality is they love Lou Holtz. They love Steve Spurrier. And then neither one of the guys won a title. They won't get criticized for not winning a title. If, a coach will at South Carolina. And I think that's good. Whereas some places there's an expectation, and the expectation with reality is a Grand Canyon difference. So I would sell that here's a great opportunity to come in. You can build your thing, do your thing. And I would, again, that's easy for me to say. I can say it from a football standpoint and doing a lot of coaching search stuff that's what I would do. But look, I mean, it's easier to say you got to pay for it. It's like saying, Neil, go buy 2 Mercedes today. I think it would be really good. Well, yeah, and you'd say, Chris, I don't have that in my budget. I can't, you know what I mean? I'm
Sure.
just being cute, but it's easy to say. And this year, I don't know that many boosters are going to be willing to write checks as much as they normally are. But that's a mess that's going to have to be cleaned up. And I will say this: that president at South Carolina come over from West Point. He kind of is. I think they need to clean house. I think Ray Tanner is going to go out with them. So I think there's some work that's going to need to be done. I just don't, as you said, I don't know if they got the money to do it now.
Here's what's interesting about them. They come to Ole Miss. I cover the Rebels for those that don't know. They come to Ole Miss on Saturday night. As of now, that game's scheduled for 6:30. They go back home and play Missouri, and Georgia on back-to-back weeks, and they finish their season, at least they're scheduled to, on December the 5th at Kentucky. So let's play that out for a minute. You're on to something on Freeze, and I want to get to it. If you made me bet today, I'd bet that they lose at Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to score on them. I think Ole Miss is decent enough defensively to pull away. I think they're going to lose to Missouri. I think Missouri's playing a better brand of football right now than South Carolina. They're going to lose to Georgia. And at Kentucky, they're going to have a hard time because it's hard to score on Kentucky if you don't have a diverse offense. And Carolina, here we are 6 weeks in, searching for a quarterback. They're opening that back up, and 3 guys are competing. And you and I both know that when you're halfway through a season and you've got 3 guys competing for a quarterback job, it's because you don't have a quarterback.
Correct.
So let's say they lose 3 of those 4 games.
That's
the pressure on them to make a change. They're going to be at that spot where all programs dread being, which is we can't afford. Ole Miss was at this spot last November. We can't afford to make a change, but we're not sure we can't afford to not make a change. And almost every time when a program is at that crossroads, they gnash teeth and they have meetings and they look at each other and they soul search and they ultimately say, let's make a change. It's the married couple that keeps going back to marriage counseling. And when the marriage counselor says, now look, both of you have to want this to work, neither one of them are able to really say, yeah, I'm really ready to work on this. They both are like, well, it's kind of her fault and it's his fault and it's fault. And it doesn't work. And that's where they are. Now, he could go 4-0 and he could quiet this because Carolina would love nothing more than for Will Muschamp, who is a very good guy and runs a good program. They would love nothing more than for Will Muschamp to kick this can down the road one more year for them financially and let them potentially get out of COVID, fill up Williams-Brice, get money back in the coffers, and then if it all goes to hell next year, you make a move.
Well, and here's what you do to your boosters. I mean, look, it's put up or shut up. So you be the booster, and I'll be Ray Tanner. Neil, look, I get you. I mean, you can't say this publicly. You want to stroke the check? We can make the move. I can do a deal. I can bring in somebody.
Yeah.
But, if we can't afford to pay him off, we can't afford to go hire somebody in, then you know what? But you can't do that. You have to sit there and say, we support fill in the blank coach. You can't come out and say, yeah, this really stinks. And we're really not happy with Will. We'd like to bring somebody else in, but we can't afford to pay him off. I mean, nobody can do that. That's a PR. You can't,
of course.
you gotta eat it up and say, look, I can do it. I can go and get another guy. You've got to come up with the money to allow it to happen.
So you talk about Hugh Freeze, and I think that is the name that they'll pursue. Spartan Barton asked, do you think the SEC will allow Hugh Freeze back in? I can tell you that per multiple sources this year, yes, they would let him back.
Yes, he can come back in.
Here's why I think Freeze fits South Carolina better than he fits a lot of programs. You mentioned South Carolina. I think South Carolina is the Ole Miss of the East. It's kind of, they've proven they can contend at times. It's hard. It's a little
without the old tradition. Ole Miss had great championship top 5 program in the 50s. South Carolina's never had that.
In another era, though. I mean,
but South Carolina's never had that.
Yeah. So, but from just a cultural standpoint, I think the two programs are kind of similar. That his past isn't going to be held against him at South Carolina the way that it would at, say, Auburn, where they sort of want an Auburn man kind of thing. It's different there. The other thing is at South Carolina, I don't know how often you're going to dip into Mississippi and Texas and Arkansas and even Tennessee to recruit. And that's where Hugh Freeze is going to have a problem if he makes waves from a recruiting standpoint. Because if he gets into a bunch of battles with Ole Miss, with Mississippi State, with Texas A&M for recruits, some of those old records are going to pop back up, and it's going to get a little embarrassing. And for the league standpoint, it's going to get a little ugly. At South Carolina, he's going to recruit a different area, and I don't think it will be as big of a deal. And he's a very good football coach. He's a very good offensive coach. I would be interested to see Chris because I thought this was his flaw at Ole Miss. Everybody talks about the massage parlors and the NCAA stuff. Listen, the NCAA thing was a witch hunt. When you dive into that document, it's just not much there. Mm-hmm. The massage parlor thing was a personal failing. I'm not going to be the guy that judges another man. It's not. We all have our personal foibles. What I think hurt him more than anything at Ole Miss was his inability to keep a real quality SEC caliber coaching staff together. When he lost good coaches, he replaced them with inadequate coaches. I'll be curious to see, can he put the kind of staff together at South Carolina that you absolutely have to compete against Georgia, to compete against Florida, and quite frankly, to compete against Clemson. Winning at Liberty, and he's done a great job of it, is taking mediocre talent and competing against other mediocre talent. And Hugh's really good at that. But can you go get the kind of talent that you have to compete against Georgia and Florida and the rest of the SEC, knowing that Clemson's sitting there at the end of every single season? I don't know that his staff at Liberty even comes close to that. And this is my one question on Freeze. Has nothing to do with massage parlors or call girls or letting offensive tackles sleep on your offensive line coach's couch. Has nothing to do with any of that. Has nothing to do with loaner cars. Because quite frankly, that was the crap that Ole Miss got in trouble for. If anybody wants to take the dive into it. It's, can he put that kind of a staff together? Does he have those kinds of contacts in college coaching where people will come move their families to work for Hugh Freeze?
Well, I think money will help that. I think South Carolina being in the SEC will help that. That is the most important thing. Well, I mean, it is amongst you've got to be able to be a good coach. He's got that. You got to be able to recruit. I think he does that well. But I think the third prong of being a really good head coach, and I've hammered it here a whole bunch, it's the difference between, say, Sam Pittman and Jeremy Pruitt. Staff hires. Yep. It's the difference, between, what's happened at Michigan, with Jim Harbaugh. The staff hires hasn't worked well. So, yeah, it is important. Money will help some of that. And I do think that there's that is to be seen. What really is a big sell job for him is that he was successful at Ole Miss. I mean,
yeah,
he pulled a couple of big upsets and he won a lot of games. And again, I think if he were to replicate similarly what he did at Ole Miss at South Carolina, it would lead to maybe, because you have to, what I call up coach a little bit there, meaning you have to get more out of your players. He can do that.
Sure.
He can have an offensive style that's going to, so I think he would be a really good hire. In fact, I do think he'd be a better fit there than he would be at an Auburn. I do agree with that. And I think even at a Tennessee where, again, there's an expectation at Tennessee that you should win the East. Maybe not now, but they believe that. They don't believe that at South Carolina. Some people may do, but for the most part, they don't. So we'll see.
They don't expect it.
Yeah. I just think there's a big difference. And look, I don't want to, I normally make it a policy to not be filling a job that's not already open. And so we said financially may not be. But it is something that is certainly a big win against Virginia Tech last week. Look, that's a more talented team at Virginia Tech. And he's done a really good job. And we're not talking about the Liberty coach. We're talking about the ex-Ole Miss coach. He's coaching at Liberty not because his football acumen, started there and now he's taking that big jump. He's a guy that's proven in this league. So, look, I think to me it makes a lot of sense. But can they do it financially? Don't know.
We'll see. Mississippi State 24, Vanderbilt 17. I'm embarrassed to admit that I flipped away from Georgia, Florida as it got out of hand. I was outside, was grilling a little bit, kind of enjoying a Saturday off, and I turned to this, and Vanderbilt scored, and I was like, well, I'll watch a little bit. And Vanderbilt damn near made this a football game. Kudos to the Commodores for competing. The other team that you've absolutely crushed since day one of you and I doing this is Mississippi State. They beat LSU to open the season, and a lot of people, self included, were like, wow, look at that. And you said, forget it. This is all on Bo Pelini, and once other people figure it out, this is not going to work. And Chris, it hadn't worked.
No, and it was ugly. It was an ugly performance. Now, I know they were shorthanded to some degree with COVID. Look, I mean, it's a bad Vanderbilt team, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't like – I'm not going to sit here and say Vanderbilt threatened, because they don't threaten, but it wasn't like, this was
made it interesting.
This was a pillow fight, though. No, it was a pillow fight. It was like, can Mississippi State screw this up? Well, maybe. There was a stretch there where I'm thinking, oh, maybe they've screwed this up enough, but just Vanderbilt couldn't, literally, it's like walk through the door. It's there. There's a light. Walk to the light. And then Vanderbilt's walking down the dark hall again. And, but this was an ugly game. It was really ugly.
Yeah, it was bad.
It really was bad.
It was. I don't even know what there else to say about it. I mean,
no, we gotta talk about.
Yeah, let's get to the one that I think's great. I watched this one. I've got one daughter at Arkansas, another that's on her way, and so we had the Hogs on in the house,
which is the underrated story. I mean, Sam Pittman's getting a lot of credit for it, and I think he's done a good job. But Neil's daughter,
she got this done.
Going to Fayetteville,
she got this done.
That's a very, very underrated part of this success.
I don't
know. Neil's too modest to mention that. I'm going to just tell you that very underrated part of this success story.
Normally, we would probably 2 years ago, we probably would not have had Arkansas, South Carolina on the TV. Arkansas, Tennessee instead of Notre Dame, Clemson, but we did. And this was a fun, interesting game. Tennessee dominated the first half, and you thought, it's done. Barry Odom made some adjustments. It appears Kendall Briles made some adjustments. Felipe Franks was terrific in the second half. Arkansas's defense stifled Tennessee, and boom, you see the final 24-13. Arkansas with a big feel-good win for their program in the middle of a feel-good season. So kudos to them, but the story here is Tennessee struggling yet again, and all the talk about the Vols are back and the Vols are ready to compete and the Vols are this and the Vols are that. No, the Vols are bad. They're not a good team. They're not an average team. They're a bad team. They just went to Fayetteville and played an Arkansas team that plays its butt off. It really does. They compete. They are well coached. They're more talented in a couple of spots than they deserve credit for. But they've got a cast-off quarterback in Franks. Got a good back in Boyd. They've got a couple of receivers that are talented. They've got a kind of a young offensive line. Defensively, they're playing with a lot of backups. The Bumper Pool's a really hard-nosed middle linebacker. They've got some.
Love that name.
Yeah, he's got a great name. They've got some pieces here and there, but this isn't an elite SEC team. Arkansas's not in any way when you watch them play, and they dominated. They dominated the second half of that game, Chris.
No, look, I've said it before, and I want to make sure this is a compliment. I know it doesn't sound like it. Arkansas hadn't beaten a good team all year. But the story is Arkansas couldn't beat anybody for quite some time.
3 years.
What they're doing is, beating teams because they're better coached and they're maximizing what they have. And they've done a phenomenal job. They really have. And I mean, this is to me amazing what they've been able to do. And I had a stat. I put this up into LandryFootball.com notebook this weekend, and I thought it was really interesting. And I want to make sure that I get it right before I get it. But and I'm gonna forget it here. I'm gonna find it here in a second. But the biggest thing that I see is the Sam Pittman in 6 games to reach 3 SEC wins. Chad Morris didn't get 1. Brett Bielema needed 18 attempts to get 3, and Bob Petrino took 11. 6 games for Sam Pittman.
They could easily be 4-2 right now. I mean,
yeah, I know. But let's get to Tennessee.
Yeah.
All right, there's a theme here that I'm seeing every week, and this is alarming to me. You can always see Tennessee loses the third quarter every week. That is a sign of an inability to make adjustments.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's just,
they got dominated in the third quarter.
No question about it. They were playing them. Barry Odom reduced the front a little bit. Tennessee's got no real answers from a coaching standpoint, a development standpoint. They're the best way I can describe them. They're a poor man's version of Georgia without the great defensive talent and with an offense that can't find out of its way unless they can run the football against someone. This is a mess. This is a big time mess. And we know they've given an extension to Jeremy, and I don't know that, other than Vanderbilt, there's not a guarantee win rest of this year. They got A&M, they got Auburn, and they got Florida. I mean, not to say the least, there's just one win that I think that's a certainty. It's a big time mess. It's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of people hitting me up that's who they need to go and get aforementioned Hugh Freeze and do this and that. Philip's not going to do it. Philip's not going to admit he's wrong. Philip Fulmer is maybe the biggest problem they have at Tennessee. From his manipulation behind the scenes to gain power, to gain control, it's been very, very political. And it's to find a guy that kind of fits the political agenda he has. Philip wants it to be with his guy and his way. Philip wants to be the guy that rides into the sunset as I'm doing this, I'm getting it, and it's not working. And the only thing I'm wondering, I've already heard somebody say that if this continues to collapse the way it is, that, how quick before Philip starts to leak out that he didn't want to give him the extension, that it was the president that did and all that, because Philip has a lot of political stoke. I think it's going to begin to wear thin and thinner and thinner and thinner, because I think, again, this is part of this problem that they've had. And, I think Jeremy Pruitt lacks a lot of polish. I think was a good coordinator, but his inability to hire and develop and work with the staff has been really troublesome. There was another issue on the sidelines Saturday night. One of the assistant coaches threatened to kick Jeremy's ass. Look, those are not ideal. When you tell the head coach, there are a lot of head coaches I want to tell I'm going to kick your ass, but you don't do it. That tells me that there's issues. We already know there've been one guy fired off the staff. It's Jeremy's known for being a problem on a staff when he was an assistant. He spent 1 year at Georgia that they still feel like it's 3 years, and that was a bad problem. And so look, when you're the head coach, you've got to make sure that the plan is in place, that everybody understands their role, that you hold people accountable. You don't have to be Mr. Nice Guy, okay? Far from it. But you got to have the command and the respect. And right now, it's not working well. And he's got to fix that. And I don't know if he's got the polish to do it. He's going to need some help because they're not buying him out. He's coming back next year. But if that doesn't change, if he doesn't fix that, what we're talking about next year a bigger problem, because it's not about, like we talked about Georgia. Georgia's not in a bad way. They've just got to fix it. They can't, it's not about going out recruiting a quarterback. It's about recruiting a quarterback and then having a way to facilitate that. Jeremy's got a lot of things that he needs to correct on his staff, in his program. And it's this, he's recruiting great. Let me remind you, they hadn't signed any of those guys. Their commitments, so there's a lot of problems there. And I think, as we said, losing to Arkansas is really, really bad. And by the way, going back to South Carolina with Will's situation, go ahead and lose to Ole Miss and Missouri, first-year head coaches. After getting blown out by A&M, it's not that you lost to A&M, that you weren't even competitive, and get blown out by LSU. And LSU hadn't done anything. The optics are looking really bad. And, Will's in a different situation. 7 years now?
Yeah.
Jeremy's third year, but it's not going in the right direction. We got some, Mike Leach, I have concerns about his ability to get it done. I have concerns about Jeremy's ability to get it done. I definitely have, beyond concerned about Will. Vanderbilt's just a mess. We got some programs in this league that are in bad shape. I mean, they really are.
Dealing with a lot of stuff. That's what it boils down to. You mentioned Ole Miss and South Carolina. That's one of the games on the schedule this weekend. We'll talk about it and other games in just a minute. First, let me tell you, this podcast also brought to you by Jupiter Security Systems. Based in Madison, Mississippi, Jupiter Security Systems provide your business with a help desk, allowing you to get software at a much cheaper price than you would pay going directly to Microsoft or the different cybersecurity services. Jupiter can set up remote monitoring on a computer regardless of the location. They don't see your data, but they'll know if malicious applications get installed on your computers. It also gives them access to your computers where their expertise can come in and replace, frankly, your stupidity, hand raised. Jupiter has helped me tremendously. We're doing lots of streaming at MPW Digital, dealing with a lot of different, software, Ecamm, YouTube, SoundCloud, Adobe Audition. That's got a lot going on basically on my computer. And at times there's user error, I should say. And Eric and the people there at Jupiter, they can help me out. They can help you out the way that they help me out. 601-519-9583 or email info at jupitersecurity.net. We're also brought to you by Blue Sky. Blue Sky believes in being fast, fresh, and friendly. Through the thoughtful layout and cleanliness of their stores, Blue Sky hopes to provide customers with a fast and easy buying experience from services to products. Blue Sky plans to keep things fresh. They always provide the freshest flavors of their brand name products and the best services available. They even bring in some of the newest products on the market to their stores to provide an even better customer experience. A smile can say it all, and at Blue Sky, they want to show you that they care about their customers and their shopping experience. They'll always strive to improve their efforts to accomplish exactly that. So check out Blue Sky today at any one of their 48 store locations across the Southeast. All right, so Chris, I'm not even sure what games are kind of on the schedule this week. I just created a banner, and I think I just lost the whole dang thing. So
I think the big thing is, I'm curious this week. Here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to see what Georgia does at quarterback. The Georgia-Missouri game is intriguing for that reason. I can't sell you Vanderbilt, Kentucky in any way possible. A&M, Tennessee is a train wreck waiting to happen if they play it. Auburn, Mississippi State is a no-go. Alabama, LSU may be a no-go. It's about how much Alabama wants to win this game by. Arkansas, Florida is, it's the best team. Well, Arkansas's played Florida. I played Georgia, but it's the second good team that they've played, and I'm curious to see how they respond to it. And then South Carolina, Ole Miss is intriguing because for the reasons we talked about, with Will, not that winning this game saves it, but boy, losing it just makes it tougher and tougher for what we just spent a good bit of while talking about. So, yeah, there's some intrigue with it. this week's action. But, the concern is that we're maybe going to lose. We've already lost one game and maybe might lose a couple of more, and that could be difficult. Have we got some questions? Any let's see here.
Sippy's Sports Show wants to know what your thoughts are on who Southern Mississippi should hire.
It's a really good question. I think it's a good job, not a great job. I don't know I think it's going to be an assistant. From what I understand, I think it'll be a bright young assistant. I don't think that they'll be able to get somebody necessarily that's a proven head coach, even at any level at this point. That's my sense from talking with them.
Yeah, I've said this for a while. I think there's a natural guy for them to hire. He's been at Ole Miss for 13 years now. Derek Nix, former USM running back.
Mm-hmm.
He's been on Houston Nutt staff at Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Freezes, Matt Lukes. Now he's with Lane Kiffin.
His name's come up.
Knows the state extremely well. Would be able to put together a young staff because he's not going to have a lot of money to work with. You talked about Freeze,
right.
Being able to get money to get him over one of his weaknesses. Well, Nix wouldn't have that, but I don't think that would be a weakness for Nix. He's coached with a lot of good young GA type coaches looking for their first opportunity. I think he could put those guys together. Solid guys, going to recruit Mississippi hard, JUCOs, all that stuff. Why not, right? When you're at the bottom, you can take a little bit of a gamble. Derek's not going to take the program any lower than it is today, he might take it to a higher level. And if he did, he's not leaving you. To me, he just makes a ton of sense.
He's a really good coach. He's somebody I know that's on their list, and I think he'd do a really good job. He'd fit a lot of the profiles for a number of the reasons that you mentioned. And again, it's a good job, but it's not a job that's going to attract a lot of sitting head coaches, even at any level. And so somebody that understands the area would make a lot of sense.
Jay Skipworth wants to know, since we brought it up earlier, do you see Rhett Lashley making the head coach move this year, or will it take another year?
It depends on the opening. Like, for example, there's a guy that would be a really good fit for Southern Miss, but I don't know that he's going to take a job like that. So I think he may. I think he'll take a job on that level, but I think he may go in a little bit of a different direction or wait. Depends upon how many openings. If there's not many openings, Jay, then that's going to reduce where you might want to go. So, yes, I think I think for him, he needs to look at it because he's done a great job with Derek King. But, you might want to do the Joe Brady move before Joe Burrow, before you have to coach without Joe Burrow. If he can get the right opportunity, I think it would behoove him to take it. I just don't know if that's going to come this year for the reasons we mentioned.
We didn't talk about Clemson Notre Dame. Don't have a lot of time left. It was a great game, very entertaining from just a fan standpoint. At the end of a long day, to watch that double overtime right before I fell asleep was a lot of fun. If Clemson wins the rematch in an ACC title, does Notre Dame become the 4?
Yeah, they are. They're going to be ahead of a one-loss A&M, and they're the issue. The only issue that would dispute that would be is if the unforeseen happens and that Florida upsets Alabama. Then you're dealing with Alabama versus Notre Dame, and you're looking at, I think Alabama would have the edge there. But I do think it matters how it looks and how they play and how competitive they are against Clemson with Trevor Lawrence in the ACC championship game. If Alabama loses, then, to Florida, how does it look? What are the circumstances? I think those things matter. But, I do think they're in better position. They're going to be ahead of A&M, and certainly they're going to be ahead of a 2-loss Florida that won the East. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's done a really good job at Notre Dame.
He's a lot better than people know.
Yeah, there are things that work against you there that really can't be overcome. And rather than complain about it and moan and groan about it, he's just sort of adjusted to it. And I think he's kind of maximized what Notre Dame can be in the current era.
Absolutely. Look, in portions of time in the Notre Dame era, the good fathers have, and I say this as a Catholic, the good fathers have given the reins up a little bit and let Lou Holtz bring in the Tony Rices and Jerome Bettises of the world that were not the academic guys. But there are a lot of things that Notre Dame people don't understand. Got to take calculus as a freshman. I don't care what curriculum you're in. You can't hide people on campus in a curriculum at Notre Dame. Your discipline comes from the university, not there. You got to live at a specific place on campus in a dorm. It is a lot. Notre Dame is more like Stanford with more restrictions. And yet, people think that Notre Dame should be competing for championships, national championships. They should not. They can't recruit the same type of players that Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama do. A lot of those guys can't go to Notre Dame. I think he does a fantastic job. Now, for him, when he's ready, an NFL job, maybe would he want to leave and go? So, it doesn't appear like he does, but I would be interested if a great job came open to where he can go and recruit and compete for a national title. I think the fact that they've made it in the BCS era, you're so right. It is so difficult. And, if Stanford were doing it, if Northwestern were doing it, Notre Dame's got more of a national profile. I get that. But the academic side of it is a lot more to those schools. And yet it's we expect Notre Dame to be like Alabama and Clemson. And they're not. And yet they're competing on a level. I don't think he gets enough credit personally. And that's maybe because people don't like him, but it's fine.
Okay. We will come back on Friday and tell you about the games that hopefully are still left on the schedule as we wrap up here on a Tuesday morning. That's one of the things about when you put something on tape, you sort of just hope that it stands the test of time. And today it might not on a couple of occasions, but there's nothing we can do about it. So thanks to everybody in the stream. A lot of you, Retro Jordan, Jay Skipworth. I don't even know how to scroll up and see all the others.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to try to answer some of these if I can. If I don't screw it up technologically, guys, drop me an email and I'll address it on the Scout's Eye or one of the others. But we appreciate all the questions, all your support, if you're cheering for bits, follow us and I'll get all those questions answered somehow, some way here.
Yep. So for Chris Landry, I'm Neil McCready. That does it for this episode of SEC Football and Beyond. We'll be back on Friday at 9 a.m. Get you ready for another weekend in the SEC and elsewhere. Until then, stay safe. Take care.